Hello, I'm glad to be back. I'm starting today with a Valentine's card that is quick and easy. I'm going to be using 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, which is Cherry Cobbler, which I fell in love with during the holidays, but which works really well for Valentine's Day too. I'm going to cut it at the 4 1/4 point the long way, which will give me a tall card, and then I'm going to score it at 5.5. So the opposite of what you normally do, so you get a tall card. Remember that when you cut this way, you must remember to score because you're working against the grain of the cardstock. So if you don't score, you'll get cracking on the edge. So when you score, fold into the score, and you'll see that works out really well. Okay. Next, we're going to get ready to do some embossing, and I plan to use white embossing powder and this stamp set. This stamp set is actually Valentine defined, but I have the French version, which is called Amour par définition. And I'm going to use a bunch of stamps in here, but starting with the border stamp, which I'm going to mount on an eye block. When you mount your stamps, put them down on your grid paper, line them up so that you can read them, the cling side, not the side you stamp with, and then push your block directly into the stamp and you'll get a nice cling. Next, I'm going to ink this up with a little bit of Versamark in order to do some embossing. Now, I just remembered something, and that is this border stamp is about 1/8 of an inch shorter than the 4 1/4 card. So instead of trying to stamp twice, I'm just going to take that 1/8 of an inch off so that I can bleed this stamp all the way across the paper. And, you know, when you're stamping, sometimes you want to stamp laying down, but in this case, the Versamark likes to jump up. So you may want to stamp by bringing the pad to the block. So I'm going to stamp across the bottom, leaving some room for the sentiment that's going to be below the border. So this is a border of hearts strung. And so I'm going to press it down, try really hard not to rock, and then lift it straight back up. And then for my sentiment, I'm going to use the little bisou stamp that's in there. Again, in the English version, I think it says love, with the O in love being a heart. But in the French version that I have, it says bisou, and the O in bisou is a heart. And bisou means kiss in French. So putting that at the bottom of the card. Now, I made a mistake here, and I kind of rocked the card a little bit. So you'll see when I add the white embossing powder that there's some lines there. And I'm pretty sloppy here. Excuse my sloppiness. I don't mind being sloppy because I find it fun, but if you want to stay neat, just stay over a large dish when you're pouring on the powder, and it won't get everywhere. So I told you I made a mistake, so I don't know if you can see it. It might be out of the scope of the camera, but there's a line above bisou. And the reason the line is there is because I rocked the stamp, and so I got the edge. So with a thin paintbrush, all I'm doing is taking the embossing powder off of that edge that's stamped above on the side of bisou. So the lucky thing about embossing is you can remove some of those mistakes. And you can't really do that when you're stamping with ink, but you can easily do it when you're stamping with embossing powder. So now I'm going to heat the powder, and I really like to watch it when it's working. It gets really bright white as the powder melts, and I love that. You know, it's kind of fun. The bad thing about heat embossing is that the paper will warp. Now, that doesn't mean this is not going to turn out great, because it will. And there's a way to manage your warping. So what I do is once I've noticed the embossing powder is mostly done, but I don't wait till it's completely done, I flip the card over. And what that does is it reverses the warp so that you balance it out. So you have a great deal of control over how much the card warps and in what direction it warps just by flipping the card back and forth over with the heat gun. It just kind of, you can control that angle that it gets. So basically that card is done. And if you wanted to use a white gel pen, You could totally use a white gel pen inside that card, and I think it would look cool if you wrote your love message inside the card with a white gel pen. So while I'm cleaning up here, I'm just trying to get my surface clean. And yes, I am a cleanaholic, so I do clean up. Even though I don't mind getting messy, I clean up as I go. So I'm taking a small piece of white paper, and just to tie it in with the front of the card, I'm going to put some stamping on it to make it match the front. So I noticed that a lot of the color palettes this year for Valentine's Day are pink and red. So I'm using a rose red, which is a little lighter color than the cherry cobbler on the inside. And so I'm just stamping that little border of hearts at the bottom and at the top of that white paper to tie it all together. And then I can glue that white paper on the inside of the card and write my message. So a lot of people want to stamp a sentiment inside. If you want to do that, there's plenty of room there for Happy Valentine's Day. But I actually like to write, like, a message with something particular on it, like, this year you were extra awesome because I think people like it when you can point out reasons why you love. But you can definitely stamp a sentiment in the middle there. But I like the way by adding a little bit of stamping to your inside paper, it brings it all together. So that's it. As you can see, that's a 5-minute card. I hope you can make some. It'll be just as much fun in English as it was in French. Have a great day.